Hello and welcome to Take Heart Journey. I am really excited to share this week's theme with you because I hope it's something that's as encouraging to you as it is to me. So I have for a long time had one of my catchphrases that I say to myself, and it's glory to glory, strength to strength. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. If you remember back in January, we began talking about entering a new thing. And we have slowly gone through all different aspects of what it's like to be in a new thing, including healing and growing and connecting and putting down roots. And unfortunately, part of what we have to talk about when we talk about a new thing and we talk about healing is that we've never quite arrived, right? I mean, we all know that healing isn't linear, and often it can be so discouraging when we feel like we're in this new era, this new thing, and some of the old things come back. And so it could be mental health related. It feels like you're going backwards. It could be relapse. It could be, something new that is sad has happened to you. And now you have to go through that healing process all over again. And that can be really hard because often we really want to have arrived at a life where we are fully healed and living to our fullest potential and all our goals are met and, we're there. But the thing is that our lives do not start when we are fully healed and when we have accomplished all our goals. Our lives are happening right now in the healing, in the hurt, in the trauma, and in the backsliding. All of that is part of our life. And so if we were to fast forward through that, there would really be none of the moments that make our lives special left. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, and how I think about moments when it feels like I have regressed in healing and it feels like I am not in a new thing. And so that phrase, glory to glory, strength to strength, is something I've thought about for a very long time. And what it means to me is that in a moment of regression, a moment of returning to what it feels like it was like before, you don't have to start over. It doesn't mean that you're back to square one. It doesn't mean that none of the good has ever happened. It means that there is a deeper layer of healing that is happening. And all of our talk and our metaphors at Take Heart really, really helped me think through this week, because when I would think of a deeper layer of healing before, what that meant to me is I would think of the metaphor of like the human body. And so it would almost be like there was a wound and that there was like even deeper, infection or sickness or disease to get out of that wound. And so you don't want to keep it there. You don't want to keep it scabbed over. You want to clean it out. But that metaphor is like really gross and really negative in my mind. And so when I think about deeper healing now, I, of course, think about roots. When my journey started, I really thought a lot about roots. When I was in the old thing, the new thing was like a maybe, someday if things are crazy, there'll be a new thing. And all of that work was underground. And now I feel like I've grown and I've strengthened, but no matter how big and how healthy a tree is, it never stops needing its roots. The roots never stop being important. And so needing to go back underground for a deeper layer of healing is not a sign of unhealthiness. It's not a sign that there's infection in a wound. It's just a sign that this is a healthy tree and those roots are always going to be important and you can never ignore them. You unfortunately are never going to reach a point where the roots aren't important. Imagine if a huge tall redwood were disconnected from its roots. That would not mean like, oh, it's now arrived. That would mean like that tree is now on its way to die. And so these moments where we need to think about the deeper layer of healing that is happening, it's really important to remember what is still above the ground, all the growth that we've accomplished. It does not go away just because our roots need some tending to. Now, the beautiful thing for me this week came at the very end of my journal page, because as I was creating, I was really picturing the green on this page as undergrowth, that it was like moss and maybe like low foliage on the ground floor of like a beautiful green lush forest. And at the very end, when I added this nest, what I realized is that this is the tops of the tree. And so as I think of glory to glory, strength to strength, I'm talking about the treetops. And the reason that this means so much to me is because part of my healing journey is I want to be a beautiful place and environment for other people to dwell, and that includes my family, of course, and my friends, and take heart. And if you think about a healthy tree and the environment that it creates, the creatures that live in that tree, every bit of it, from the dead leaves to the healthy leaves to the branches to the holes that might be in its trunk, all of that becomes inhabited by life and it becomes part of the ecosystem. And it's really important. And so thinking about a tree that's big enough and strong enough to have a nest in it, to have a bird and baby birds and family there, that really means a lot to me, because that's what I'm trying to do. That's where I'm trying to go. And so to connect that idea of glory to glory, strength to strength, to the idea of the healthy dwelling place that a beautiful, strong tree can create was so meaningful to me. And I also have some really special, new to me Bible verses that I'm going to share with you as I go through the creation of this page, because it gives that nest even another layer of meaning. And I found that Bible verse in the place where the Bible does use the phrase strength to strength. And so what that means to me is that when I am moving on, I never have to say I am going from strength to weakness or glory to failure, but every single thing that's happening is glory to glory or strength to strength. And so even in my weakness, even in moments of regression, moments of hardship, I am still moving strength to strength. And for me, it's because my personal dwelling place is always going to be with God. And so that is a beautiful thing, that I have a safe place. And now in my own healthiness, I can create a safe place for other people too. So I hope this week encourages you. If you have felt like there have been setbacks, if your routine has been off this summer, if halfway through this year you just are not feeling like this is a new thing, I hope this is an encouraging week for you, that you don't throw it all away, that you can remember all that you've done to grow and reach for the sun above ground, and that it's okay to need to get back to some of that root work. All right, let me tell you about the supplies that I used today. I really love this page today. I love all the supplies. I kind of went back to the things that I love. There's lots of collage paper. There's gesso that I used a palette knife to put through a stencil. There is sap green paint. There is green gold paint and white and raw umber. And then you also can probably notice these words. I just used black acrylic paint on a little sponge through a stencil for those words. And the nest was drawn with some charcoal pencil. And of course, you need matte medium to get all that collage paper down. So this is a very fun, textured, satisfying, and cathartic page today. I hope you enjoy making it and that you can start thinking of your own life and how you're going from glory to glory, strength to strength. The first thing I did for this project is gather all of my collage paper. And the color scheme today was all inspired from this first piece of paper, that brown piece of paper. It came in the mail wrapped around something, and I ended up absolutely loving it. I loved how it worked with matte medium. It is a little more opaque than tissue paper, but still see-through, and it got me gathering all these browns and greens and tan color, and this is the color scheme that I would use throughout my project. My next step is to take this piece of paper and start journaling on it so that I can just kind of think through what I am trying to do on this journal page. And so I started with the words, "Healing is not linear," and that was my prompt. And I went from there. So you're welcome to do the same thing. Think through the idea that healing is not linear. And this was a really good reminder for me of all the growth that I've experienced and how a lot of who I am today actually came from the really hard days before. And so as much as I really don't want to relive them, and any little bit of regression brings that fear in me that I'm going to go right back to the same suffering of before, I also really can't regret it because I know all that it's brought me. And so this was a really good journal time for me. And I also have to tell you, I loved how it looked on this brown paper. My next step is just to cover the background with all of this collage paper. So I'm going to use this brown paper that I've written on, and I'm also going to use some of the little scraps that I pulled aside at the very beginning. And I had a lot of fun playing with some of the ripped edges and having some things peeking out from underneath where it was ripped, but I really as much as I had fun laying this all down and choosing where it would go, none of this was about perfection because I knew this is the first layer. It's going to all get covered up. It's just going to lay the groundwork for all the layers to come and also give me the little pieces of my color palette and the texture that I'm really craving on this page. Now that I've laid everything out, I'm going to use plenty of matte medium to glue it all down. And again, notice how cool this brown paper is. If anyone knows what this is called, you should let me know. Because when you glue it, you can see through it a little bit, and I really loved that effect. And there were two sides. One was matte, like craft paper, and the other was glossy. And when I glued it down, I put down the glossy side so that it would be more matte on that top edge and be something that I could create on top of. So this part was really fun. It's just me gluing down all the little bits and pieces that I laid out and getting this first layer done. All right, now that I have my layer of paper down, I am going to add some texture. I have been craving doing this, and I'm going to just take some regular gesso on a palette knife and push it through this stencil. And the look I had in mind was definitely more antiqued with imperfections on purpose, and so you'll see that I don't apply it perfectly because I wanted it to be uneven and more like an aged effect than a perfect stencil. And so I put gesso through the front of the stencil, and then after, I also use it to stamp down on some other parts of the page, and I absolutely loved doing this, and I loved how it turned out, and I loved how the white of the gesso contributed to the color scheme. And one thing that I try to show you throughout this video is how often I needed to dry this page, because I do a lot of matte medium, a lot of washes, and in order to create what I wanted to create, I needed the page to be fully dry for each new layer. And sometimes I edit that part out, but I just wanted you to know that in between every single one of these layers, I have completely dried the page, and that really helps me in creating what I want to create. All right, it is time to use this stencil that I won from a Sean Petit giveaway about a year ago, and I'm finally going to use it. So I'm using that same brown paper. I have some black paint and then a little makeup sponge, and I'm just getting a little bit of paint on there. And I'm going to stencil out the word glory. I want it to say glory to glory, and so I'm going to make the word a few times and see which ones I like, because that's kind of the advantage of getting to make a stencil on a separate piece of paper instead of directly onto your journal page, because you can pick the ones that you like the most. You can change it if you want to. And one thing that surprised me is this was actually one of my favorite parts of creating this page. You will see that I get purposefully a little messier the more that I go, where there's kind of extra black paint, smudges and drops. And I really liked that, because the idea of this not being perfectly written out, not in perfect calligraphy, exactly fits what I wanted to convey, that glory to glory isn't bright and shiny and perfect, that it means that even when it gets really hard and really messy, you haven't lost how far you've come. And so I actually really loved doing this, and I think I made the word glory like 4 times more than I needed to. And I have to tell you too, I had that thing happen where you stare at a word for too long and it just doesn't make sense anymore. So the word glory was the weirdest word I had ever seen by the time that I was done with this, but it was very cathartic and really fun for me to stencil this out and figure out exactly what I wanted the word to look like. All right, after I'm done stenciling, I take a very fine paintbrush and I'm just going to fill in the gaps left by the stencil, and this made me love the words even more. I'm just gently connecting the places where the stencil had a break, and so I am going to go through each word and just touch it up and make it look exactly the way I want it to look. All right, it is time to play with the amazing layers that are on this background. The first thing I'm going to do is a wash of white. So I have white paint with a little bit of water that I'm going to spread over most of the page. I like the idea of keeping some of that right middle a little bit darker just because I love the brown color of that paper so much, but the rest of it, I'm just doing a very light wash. And I'm also going to add a little bit of gold throughout so that we have some metallic, something pretty, and I come and press down with my paper towel and then I dry it completely. So now that this is completely dry, I'm going to come in with a wash of green, and I have sap green, which is the darker green, and green gold, which is the lighter green. But as soon as I add water to sap green, it's the exact same color as green gold, which that was really cool to find out. And as I begin making this wash on the page, it was so exciting. I was so happy. I absolutely loved how this looked. The texture of the stenciling, the layers of paper all made this wash look so beautiful to me, and it really looked to me like foliage, like there was this lush greenery all around. Now, one thing you need to remember with a wash is it always dries a lot lighter than it looks when everything is wet. And so I do come into some areas with the dark green, and then I also do a few splatters by taking that watered down green on my brush and just tapping a few times. So this is mostly dry. I'm going to add a little bit of gold here and there, and then I'm going to dry it completely, and you'll see after it's dry that the green definitely lightens a little bit. All right, I have cut out my words, and now it is time to glue them down with some matte medium, again with a very dry background. So I dried that background again, and I move the words around until I find a spot that I like, and then with a heavy amount of matte medium, I glue them all down. Now that I have a background that I love, I have the words down that I pictured, I'm going to just start playing around. I add a little more of that green wash to the page because I want to darken some of those areas, and you'll see me go back and forth and back and forth. I feel now like my dense forest, rich with texture, really needs some loops. So I'm going to use some Posca pens to doodle some little vines hanging down at the top. And this was really fun to add, and not all of them made it to the final page, but I loved the idea of having all these pretty vines and loops hanging down from the top of the page. All right, now that I have added some drips and some vines and some loops, I want to come in with a wash of raw umber, and I'm so glad I did. This reminded me my love for raw umber wash, because at first there's really nothing impressive about it, but as soon as I rub that in and wipe it off, it's like it reveals every single layer that I put down before, and all the details of the papers, the white gesso, the stenciling, it all shows through after that raw umber. It's time for me to explain to you the meaning of this piece, which I do a little bit in the intro, but this was so exciting for me because I got to this point in the page and I loved everything I did up to this point, but it still did not feel complete until I started thinking of the idea of a nest. And I hope you see that you can basically draw a donut and then sketch in the lines of the twigs, and it turns itself into a beautiful, messy nest. I have nests on the mind because I did a nesting class with Sean Petit, and then it came to me because of the Bible verses that are related to glory, strength to strength. I was trying to figure out where those words first came from. They've just kind of been on my mind for years, but trying to figure out if it was a quote, where it was from. And the phrase glory to glory is in scripture, and then in a separate place, the phrase strength to strength is there. And it's in the psalm that talks about better is one day in your court than 1,000 elsewhere. And so the idea is of a pilgrimage and people who are traveling to be near God. And it says they go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion. But in that same psalm, which I never saw before, there's a verse about a sparrow, and it says, even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may have her young, a place near your altar, Lord Almighty, my King and my God. And this is very safe imagery for me. The idea that I could kind of sneak into the house of God to be near him, make a little nest somewhere by the altar or maybe in the ceiling on one of the rafters, and find a safe, small way to be close to God. And then the idea of a branch with a nest, of course, means so much to me with my imagery of a seed that is growing, who's working on the underground stuff, the roots, and how I can now be a place that is a dwelling, that can make a home, that can host a nest. And all of these separate meanings for the nest meant so much to me and were so exciting. And then of course I loved how it looked too. So adding this nest transformed this for me from like the ground foliage to the treetops of a huge tree that has so much life thriving and living, and a nest that's a little home, a place to be near God.